maybe let's have a bit of time to have some questions. I've kind of been yakking a bit up here. Don't want to keep people too bored here. Let's look at some,
Can you speak to different strategies for learning the detachment?
The Noble Eightfold Path. We're going to be getting into a little bit more of that as we go through the day in a bit more detail. But a lot of, the beginning stages of learning how not to cling, how not to hold, is really, that's where we want to run. We want to get to the cure pretty fast, as fast as we can. It's the natural human tendency. We want to. How can we get right to non-attachment? And really, for most of us, it is keeping coming back to asking ourselves to really explore and fully understand this first truth deeply. Because oftentimes we enter into the strategies or the path factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, or any way that we're trying to deal with the difficulties of our life. We're entering into it with this kind of negotiating mind. It's sort of like, if I do this, then I'll get rid of this. We experience something difficult or unpleasant, and the immediate reactive tendency is to want to get rid of it. So we want to jump to the cure before we understand the problem. So really, the first thing towards moving towards non-attachment or detachment from holding on to all of these ways, of these forms of existence, these aggregates, is by relaxing for a minute the movement of our mind that's trying to find the cure, and to really remind ourselves that we need to understand the problem. So that really is the most important first layer strategy, to really, because it's a deeply embedded attitude that we have in our minds, to want to avoid pain. It's kind of hardwired into our system, and so much of our conditioning is looking for the quick fix, whether it's in the material realm, the quick fix of medicines, or distraction, or jumping into, as I was just reading, seeking sensual pleasure as a way to distract ourselves from a difficult situation, painful situation, that we don't take the care and the time to adopt longer-term strategies. And that's what if we're really interested in ending dukkha, we have to accept a long-term strategy, and it's really through this attitude adjustment right in the beginning, as opposed to specific techniques. There are different things that we can do. In again, it really comes down to the Noble Eightfold Path, that how we live our lives, the moral quality that we live our lives, the different livelihoods we take up, all the external conditions that we can change in our lives, and then the cultivation of development of mind, the development of meditation practice, effort to increase wholesome states of mind and to abandon unwholesome states of mind, because all of those have to be in place for one to develop the contemplative ability to really see the subtle ways that we cling, that we hold to things. So there's a lot of groundwork and preparation. It's not a quick, easy path of some simple strategies. But again, always going back to understanding the problem first. We have to keep coming back to that. We have to keep on, and that's really through this attitude of just really ingraining ourselves over and over again of how we need to learn over and over again, slowly and deliberately, that what it is that's inherently going to be difficult, and that we can't expect to go away, no matter how many skillful strategies we learn. The body's going to be painful. The body's going to get old. The body's going to die. And really the only antidote to that is by accepting it, looking at that. And that's your strategy. And the need for a lot of patience. If you want to look at a mental attitude that's a strategic one, that attitude of patience, being willing to coexist with that which is unpleasant, is a huge tool. It's one of the tools that Ajahn Chah would talk about as being one of the most important mind qualities to develop, is a sense of patience. I was telling this story a couple of days ago, I think, at the monastery in one of the afternoon teachings that we had, that when I was an Anagarika, fellow in white, like this guy over here, the first layer of training in our system. I was driving Ajahn Amaro and Ajahn Pasano down to LA for some teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama at UCLA, and one of the people have probably heard this story before, so excuse me. It's one of the things that one does when one gets older is one repeats one's stories. But it's a good one. And sometime during maybe the second of 3 days of teaching, it was a huge auditorium, lots of people, UCLA campus, and he was giving some of his teachings, around a gradual path. And there was a time for questions and answers, and somebody in the audience, raised his hand and said, "Well, what you've been talking about is all well and good, but it seems like this really is a difficult path. It's it's long. It's what you're teaching is difficult, and it takes a lot of commitment. Is there a way? Is there a path that is a bit easier, a bit faster than this one, where I can realize the end of this dukkha?" And His Holiness went silent, and the whole stadium was just like, you could hear a pin drop. And after a minute or two, His Holiness, you could just see the tears coming down his face, and then he said, in what could only be described as the lion's roar, in this very incredibly powerful voice, it's like, there is no fast, there is no easy. If there were, don't you think I would be teaching you that? This is a path of long-term commitment, So we have to enter into it with that kind of sense of all the time in the world, all the patience, because the habits are, that's why we're all here. As we've been, conditioning ourselves to repetitive birth and all that goes along with it, because we don't understand, because it's difficult, it's subtle. But it is doable, and it's actually, for some people it's doable in this lifetime with an incredible amount of commitment. And if it's not happening in this lifetime, then we have to have the commitment to keep on going no matter how long it takes. Because what's the alternative, So that's the attitude. That's the beginning of the path to non-attachment, is accepting that it's going to take some time, accepting that we're all in the same boat, we're all doing the same thing, and we're not alone, and that the first thing to do is to really understand it deeply and not get caught in I got to get rid of it as fast as possible, But let me understand it first. Let's get the diagnosis. Let's really deeply comprehend this and see little ways to start loosening up our hold. And we'll talk about some more of this later on too. Yeah. I can, but you know what? Nobody else can, so there's a microphone coming.
Yeah. I think it's not a smart question, but I just can't understand that well, so I need some clarification between the differences between the duality of life and the neutral state of mind and the middle way. So can you differentiate that?
The difference between the duality of life?
The neutral state of mind and the middle way. So, the either or.
The what state of mind?
Yeah, sometimes we have in the neutral state of mind.
Neutral.
So I wonder what the differences between the middle way and how we apply to it, and when we are in a state of mind that we are like neutral. You mean about neutral? That mean not either or, and how we apply it in the terms of duality.
Duality meaning the extremes of
good,
life.
Good, bad, either or. Like two sides of the coin. But then when we try to keep our mind in the term of like middle path or middle way or neutral. So what are the differences? All the terminology.
Taking some of the terms and kind of conflating them together is, I think, a bit of a problem. But
a little bit confused.
Because it kind of harkens back to some of the more basic teachings, particularly even from that first sutta that I was talking about. But just briefly, when the Buddha talks about the middle way, he's generally talking about a middle way of practice. Generally. So that in his time, and any time, you can see the equivalence of it here now too, there were, different schools of what were called spiritual thought or spiritual practice. And he basically said there's these two extremes, the path of pure sensuality, pure sensual indulgence, nothing matters, might as well go for it, kind of the hedonistic path of just like nothing matters, might as well just enjoy life to the fullest. And then the other extreme of what he would call self-mortification, like ascetics at that time who would do a lot of self-torture practices, inflicting pain, difficulty as a way of purifying their karma. So those were the two extremes that he talked about, and he said, well, the path is actually a middle way of neither self-indulgence nor sensual indulgence nor self-torture. And the path that he described was what he called the middle way. It wasn't like a happy medium between the two, but it was something completely different that didn't deny the realities of needing, a relative level of physical comfort and energy, but not overindulgence. And then the path of training was the middle way, which is different from what I think you might have been interpreting as between painful and pleasant feeling and neutral feeling, which is a slightly different aspect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello over here.
Hi.
Hi.
I've been working with the detachment and letting go, surrendering. I can't control the situation. What I don't understand is if to overcome something you have to put some action or intent in, I would think. Like I didn't come here today with just surrendering. I had to take some action and I had to have intent to come here. And so it just seems so passive to me don't you have to at some stage take action? You can't just surrender and let life take you wherever you're going.
Absolutely, because usually when we're surrendering to our defiled states of mind and letting them take control over us, even if it's a subtle form of that. So it's a very energized and conscious way of not attaching. It's not like a completely passive activity. And the Buddha talks about the whole path of effort. That's one of the Eightfold Path is right effort. And that goes along with right understanding, like with understanding this noble truth of what it is that is alterable and what is not alterable, what it is that we have control over and what it is that we don't have control over. So the whole factor of effort is learning how to recognize and abandon unwholesome or unskillful states of mind, and how to recognize and develop skillful states of mind. And that all takes effort. It's not a passive thing by any means. So the whole aspect of the path and the training that's, that is recognizing and not holding and not attaching and not letting go, and letting go, that aspect is applied to those things that we really can't control. Which doesn't mean that it's all completely out of our control. We have a modicum of control in our lives, and we have to recognize what it is that we can control, and then apply effort to developing the qualities to tweak it in the direction we're looking to go. So it's a combination of those two things. And again, I'm going to be talking a bit more about it, but it's that being able to differentiate between the two, and that's actually, it goes back to all the teachings on karma, and the fact that the Buddha's teaching on karma is that it's the world of experience isn't completely either chaotic, like just totally without any kind of rhyme or reason, and it's not totally deterministic. It's not like tit for tat, one action has a set and inevitable reaction to it. That it's that kind of combination of, there are things that we have done by body, speech, or mind in the past that we are feeling the effects of in the present moment. That's karma from past action. And to a large extent, we can't stop that from happening. We can't, completely prevent the results of past actions from happening. And that's kind of some of the things that we can't control. Like, we got ourselves born to begin with, and we can't control the fact that, we experience what all human beings experience. That's kind of out of our control. Birth, aging, death. We can't control that. We can control how we meet anything in the present moment. We do have the option of how to react in a way that whatever it is that we're experiencing is experienced with or without this added layer of suffering. We do have the ability to create skillful states of mind that will affect our experience in the future. So what we do, what we say, what we think, all the conditions that we bring in to our present moment experience do have an effect on how we experience events from the past, the results from past karma, and how we experience it right now, and how we can experience it into the future. So it's not just being merely passive and accepting everything as the way it is, because usually what will happen is that, we're not actually, we would be, just by being completely passive, generally we're allowing our habitual states of reactivity in mind to take over and control how we do experience it in the moment, and how we're setting the ground for the future. So the receptivity, the recognition, and the non-attachment, the non-clinging are two conditions that we have to accept as inevitable because it's just the way, the world works, the way that these 5 khandhas have been conditioned and are experiencing the world. But we do have to have the ability to control and take action when it's something that we can do something about, which is primarily in this present moment. It's how we react and how we create actions for the future experience.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have 2 boys, 6 and 9.
Say again?
I have 2 children.
Oh, you have 2 children,
boys.
ages 6 and 9?
Yes.
2 boys.
Yes. Sorry. Just kind of hoping what I'm doing here will sort of rub off on them. I think it is, which is great. But is there any advice in terms of, this is pretty conceptual stuff in some sense, but it's also very simple. But is there any way to sort of kind of impart some of this wisdom, if you will, to my kids? Is there any advice on how to do that, or techniques, or whatever may apply?
Bring them to the Spirit Rock family camp each year.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that.
They just had that, and a couple of our monks were down for that. It's a great venue for introducing children into the teachings. As a parent, in some ways you're probably asking the wrong person, because I've never done it with kids. I used to be a nurse, but I worked at the other end of the age spectrum with older people and dying people. So ask me questions about that, and I'll be able to. But generally speaking, I think, from my understanding of how kids work and watching my 2 nephews grow up with my sister family, kids mostly respond to watching their parents and how they're doing. Maybe much more that than hearing teachings and trying to incorporate them. They're looking at you, and saying, well, what tweaks my dad, and how does he respond, and let me test the waters and see how he reacts. So what they're learning about the path is how you've incorporated it into your own life, and how it comes back at them when they test the boundaries.
They do that well.
Yeah, that's what kids are supposed to do. It's part of nature, isn't it? Yeah, right. So it's just, in fact, actually that's not just true for kids, but how we can impact and help other people is, not by learning how to be a good teacher of Dhamma practice for all ages, but how to live it, and how to practice it inside ourselves and realize the truth and the benefits and the fruits of the practice inside ourselves, and then they'll pick up on it. So rather, it's like walking the walk rather than talking the talk. Over here, this woman had her hand up first, and then the woman in the back afterwards. So go ahead.
A couple of times, conditioned realm. I'm not sure if I understand what that term means. Can you explain it a little bit more?
The realm of conditions, yeah. It's basically all this stuff that we're living in. The Buddha talked about the realm of conditions, or the conditioned realm, samsara, the wandering on, as opposed to the teachings on nibbana, which is the ending of samsara, the end of wandering on. And it's both talked about in terms of, the realities that we experience, as well, the external realities that we experience, as well as the internal realities. This wandering on, this conditioned realm. So basically, the realm of birth and death, and in the Buddhist teachings, the fact that there are that this process of being, this process of birth and being, is not just limited to this one lifetime, but keeps on going lifetime after lifetime after lifetime.
So it's like the whole cycle of reincarnation?
It's the cycle of existence, or the experience of existence, is what's referred to as the conditioned realm, and it's this rolling on of existence that we experience that's based on this causal conditioned process, the process of karma, just rolling our lives from one to another, and even in our present life, our experiences in this moment from one to another, usually with this, what we call this layer of underlying tendencies of greed, hatred, delusion, confusion, ignorance, not seeing essentially the Four Noble Truths, the way out of it. So that it's this ongoing process of conditions that we call the conditioned. And it's what we're all experiencing for the most part. The unconditioned refers to when we have allowed that process to cease through our understanding and penetration of the Four Noble Truths, the end of suffering. Yeah. Back here. Back against the wall. Yep, yeah. And
Thank you. I just wanted to build on the two questions these two gentlemen asked and go a little further with it about the idea of what's out of your control and what's in your control, and how do you apply that to other people in your life. And the fact that you mentioned you're a nurse is like a perfect opportunity to ask for those of us in the room who are caregivers in some way, and we're dealing with suffering in other people, especially emotional or mental suffering, whether there's trauma or medical illness. I'm wondering, what are some ways to practice living with ourselves, but also reaching out and giving compassionate action to someone who doesn't appear that they've got the faculties to lift themselves out of delusion and emotional dysregulation and that kind of thing?
yeah, it's a good question, because so much of the time our wish to help other people is bound up with how we think it should be done, or we have a certain goal in mind, or an expectation, or at least a hope, if not an expectation, that they will respond according to how we think it will be, such that they will be suffering less. And we base our actions as helpers on that kind of goal orientation, which in a sense is, we do want to have the goal of alleviating suffering. We don't, as sensitive human beings, we don't like to see other people suffer. If we've explored it enough in ourselves and we know what suffering feels like, it moves the heart when we see it in other people too, so we want to respond accordingly. But if we don't really understand the cause of real suffering, and that which we can control and that which we can't control, then we're caught in, at best, only partial solutions that we're offering to people. We can only offer people what it is that we really know for ourselves. And if our knowledge is partial, then we can offer partial help in ways that we know and experience. The more we get clear inside of ourselves as to how suffering arises and how suffering ceases, and the more we personally get out of the way, and then the more sensitive we can be as to how it kind of manifests in other people's lives, and how it is, we might be able to see a little more clearly how they may be creating suffering or difficulty for themselves that they don't need to. But it's only until we touch it deeply inside of ourselves that we're going to be able to in the best way, offer that support to other people too. Which doesn't mean that we don't offer what we can while we are still learning. There's a lot going out there that needs attention, but just to realize that we won't be able to be fully effective until we really deeply understand inside of ourselves, for ourselves, that whole process of what can be dealt with, what has to be left alone for people to work out themselves, and then most importantly, how to provide that space for people to discover it themselves, rather than going in and trying to personally cure it.
What do you do or say when you have that understanding that someone is creating the suffering for themselves? What is the action you take?
Really depends on the circumstance and where that person is and who they are in my relationship with them. If it's somebody that I have a trusting relationship with and we have an agreement that it's okay if I say something that might be a bit difficult if they're trapped in some sort of habit, then I can say it. And if I don't have that kind of relationship with them, I need to be much more careful. But usually the best approach that I find is just to enter into a relationship or a space with somebody where you create a sense of comfort, in this sphere of here's me, here's you, here's the space between us. Let's meet in the space between us, so that it's more like asking questions, exploring what's going on, not giving so much advice, but just allowing, kind of asking the right questions to direct a person towards being able to see what's going on inside themselves. Because a lot of times what I think might be going on inside of them isn't what it is. It's like I often have my own projections based on my own, conditioning. I think that, they're experiencing this because they must be experiencing this because that's what I'm experiencing. But so you learn how to be a bit more neutral in what you think somebody else's experience might be, and to get them to explore inside themselves and then to kind of put it out there in a space where they can see it a little bit better. Because a lot of times it's all the stuff that's going on in our heads is what's confusing us, and if we have somebody else who lets us kind of put it out in front of us between the two, that space is created to as a safe zone where a person can put their stuff out and then they can see it themselves, and then you don't have to do much of anything except be that mirror.
Thank you.
The fellow up here with a question.
Thank you. So you have begun to establish the teaching framework that the Buddha laid out, and I'm thinking and I'm wondering if you could address the issue of loving kindness and compassion, and where you feel it fits into the framework or the structure of the Buddhist teachings of dukkha, because I feel like it's obviously, in my feeling, it's obviously a huge component. A big component of the Buddha's teachings. And it opens a window. I feel it opens a window in order to see more clearly what dukkha is and how it is affecting our reactions on a day-to-day basis. I think that loving kindness just fits into this whole picture, and I wondered if you could just address your feelings on where you feel it does fit in to this structure.
Absolutely. Loving kindness, metta, karuna are so important mind qualities to allow to be developed in our minds, in our hearts, because that allows us to fully understand dukkha. And the more we fully understand dukkha as our own experience, the more we, as I was just saying, the more we can know it in ourselves, it feeds back onto compassion and kindness that we sense with others' difficulties. They go hand in hand. Basically just the attitude, compassion and kindness are attitudes that we develop. They're mature emotions, as Ajahn Sumedho would call them, and they're part of skillful conditions that we need to develop as part of our path. And without them, we can only probably get so far in terms of penetrating that First Noble Truth. Because if you don't have a sense of openness and receptivity and gentleness, sensitivity, if we don't have those for ourselves as well as for other people, but we need to primarily start with ourselves. If we don't have that, then we're not going to be able to touch the dukkha on a deeper level. We're still going to be caught in resistance. Because, the resistive habitual states of mind are the minds that don't have so much of that kindness and compassion. Compassion, loving, metta, karuna are very, or at least when they're developed fully, they're very expansive, unbounded states of mind. They're still conditioned. They're still part of the conditioned realm, but they're probably about as good as it gets in the conditioned realm. And that allows us the space to really, fully understand dukkha. We have the container, we have the capacity to accept a whole lot more. In fact, the totality of our experience in that state of mind. And we experience the world with all of its pain and pleasure in a much more easy way with those states of mind. The Buddha has a great simile. He uses it more in terms of when we're experiencing the effects of past action, past karma, like say maybe we're experiencing some very painful situation that maybe did have a result of from some past action. Who knows what it was in this lifetime or other lifetimes? But he talks about that. Let's say that we have some sort of experience that's difficult or unpleasant, and we have a very small state of mind, and we really experience it intensely. If our mind state is very narrow and fixed and small, and he compares it to like a glass of water. If you have a glass of water and you throw a lump of salt into it and you drink the water, you'll taste the salt, right? If you take that same lump of salt, same lump of salt, throw it into the river Ganges, let it dissolve, and take a scoop of water from the river Ganges and taste it, you're probably not going to taste it. And so, like the mind that is unbounded with kindness, compassion, those boundless qualities, if we practice that and focus that, then all the difficulties, the painful consequences of our own actions, the painfulness of the world, it's still there, it's still experienced and known, but the vastness of the mind that can hold that and be with it as a mind imbued with metta, with karuna. It's not that the experience isn't there, but you can see how the intensity is so much less, so that it provides that space that we can hold just about anything that comes along our way.
So you feel that loving kindness and compassion is the foundation behind each of the teachings that we're working with?
I don't know if I would say it's a foundation per se, but it certainly is an integral aspect of mind quality that is very important to develop. Yeah.
Okay, so then each of the aspects of working with dukkha, does it carry with it? Is it imbued with these feelings of loving kindness and compassion, or are they somehow separate and then brought together later, in your view?
They work hand in hand, and a lot of it depends on a person's proclivity of mind. I think that essentially the core components of the teaching rely, eventually on the development of a certain level of tranquility of mind, peacefulness of mind, that can then really delve into developing insight in how suffering arises and how suffering ceases. And there's a whole lot of tools that go along with developing that. And the tools of metta and karuna are certainly part and parcel of that. It's part of right intention, the development of the mind that's not averse and is not harmful, as part of the path. So it's a very important aspect of mind that can be developed consciously, and also is a result of developing other parts of the path at the same time.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Wondering if we can hold, maybe one more question, and then it's probably time to have a little quiet meditation. One more question over here for now. There'll be plenty of time for other questions throughout the day too.
So I have somewhat of a twofold question, and the first part of the question is following the lines of dukkha and how life is suffering, right? And if oftentimes as a reaction to suffering, others will cause suffering to others in order to feel that pain.
In order to feel...
others will inflict suffering on others as a direct reaction to their own suffering.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, you want to provide love and compassion and understanding and provide a space for them to heal themselves, but you don't necessarily want to have them spread that suffering. Or is that something that is out of your control and that you kind of, while you're walking the line of providing love and compassion, do you just relinquish control of them causing suffering, or do you provide a space where they do not inflict more suffering on others?
Yeah, a lot of it is, again, going to be one of those individual circumstance kinds of things. You certainly, if you have a relationship with somebody where they are open to your input, then recognizing when someone's actions are causing harm and intervening in a way that can be effective is certainly a skillful thing to do. Because, the hurting other people because they've hurt us is very common. It's a short-term strategy for getting relief. It makes us feel better for about 10 seconds, if that. But it's it's a strong habit. And it's hard to develop the counter habit of just like not doing that. Because it just keeps the ball rolling. You do it, somebody does it to me, I do it to you, you do it to somebody else, or you come back to me. It's just like it's endless. So if you have a relationship with somebody and you see that happening and you can skillfully point that out, then by all means, take action. if you don't have that kind of relationship, or the person isn't ready, then sometimes you have to know the time and place, if at all. And so you take action when you can and when you think it'll be effective in terms of gently giving feedback. But you also have to have wisdom to know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. If it's the right time, maybe things need to cool down. So it's sometimes better just withdrawing and not responding right away. Let things cool down, then you go back when you're not agitated, when they're not agitated, and say, let's talk about this. Can we talk about this?
Okay, and then the second part of the question is, you kind of related dukkha and suffering and with karma, and sometimes it can be traced back in past lives and things like that. Now, following the same line of, if someone is causing suffering, let's say that this person is causing suffering and they commit crimes and different things and they inflict it on their victims, right? Are those victims in turn experiencing karma for their own previous actions, or is it
almost impossible to tell those kinds of situations? The Buddha talks about, I think it's the 4 imponderables, things that you just will never understand on this kind of level, and the actual complexity of the workings of karma is one of those. Because the law of karma is a law, a natural law of how things work, cause and effect. But there are other natural laws that apply to the laws of biology, the laws of genetics, the laws of physical realities of the planet and its forces. Those kinds of laws. So all of these laws are kind of interacting, and also, the amount of actions and results that an individual experiences, it's unfathomable. It's impossible to understand. So whether some victim is experiencing something that's the result of past action, or whether it's not related to that, is near impossible to discern by normal human being. Only a Buddha really can see that happening. So the wise, in that case, the wise reaction is just kind of this, open compassion, wishing to be skillful as best one can in the present moment and to develop good qualities from here on out.
Thank you.
Yeah.